My live button is back on, so we're back in session of the Blue Ribbon Task Force to revitalize the Vermont dairy industry. Our next speaker is Catherine Durand, who I believe you're with us, Catherine. Yes, there you are. And the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to meet with this group. It's always really exciting to see the involvement of states and just the willingness to all come together to support our industry. You know that we have our work cut out for us, and it's just great to have everyone on board and on the same track to do whatever we can to help. So thank you so much for your efforts and for having me today. So, per your request, I'm going to give, some comments here today and just kind of give you a little bit of a backstory of who Agrimark and Cabot are. Some data just really backing up, number of farms and things like that to just give you a familiarity with our organization a little bit more. And then I'll open it up and see where you all want to take the conversation. So first of all, you all know that we are a dairy cooperative, which is a lovely but challenging model, right? We are one big family, and our farmers are so connected to our employees and vice versa. We all rely upon one another, and it is, like any family, very challenging to have a relationship like that, but has really worked well for us over the years, especially during this COVID time period, where we've had to come together quite a bit and are making it through and succeeding because of it. So we are owned by approximately 730 dairy farmers in New England and New York. 159 of those reside in Vermont. So let me just kind of give you a feel for what our membership side looks like, and then I'll talk about more of the manufacturing and the products and whatnot. So as you know, our members invest equity into our cooperative to support the business structure, and 100% of our profits at the end of the year go back to our farmer owners. So at Cabot or in Agrimark, we market and our farmers produce about 3.3 billion pounds of milk in any given year. In Vermont, that represents about 34% of the milk that is produced in Vermont. We have 159 farmers in Vermont, about 870 million pounds. And our average size farm here in Vermont is about 220, 230 cows. So we're really proud to have Vermont as really our home state, but we do have members in all of New England and New York. Now, on the manufacturing side, we are really proud that we have 4 manufacturing plants here in the Northeast. 3 of those are cheese producing, and 1 of those is a butter and powder facility. So let me start with outside of Vermont first. So we have a Chateauguay, New York plant just across the border of Vermont. And that is where we produce a lot of cheddars. We also do some other cheese products, and those primarily will go into either our Macadam brand or into our Cabot brand as sort of a New York cheddar. We also produce whey in that facility, and what we do with that whey, even though it's produced in New York, it will actually get shipped into our Middlebury plant in Vermont, and that's where it's processed into further products. The second facility we have outside of your state is in West Springfield, Massachusetts. That is where we produce butter and powder. And then if we move up to Vermont, we have 2 manufacturing sites. So we have our Middlebury plant, and that's where we do primarily just, regular old cheddar. We also do the whey proteins, as I mentioned there. And then we have our Cabot facility, sort of the namesake of our brand. And there we're doing our Vermont cheddars, flavored cheddars, our cultured products. So whether that's, our Greek yogurts, cottage, sour cream, etc. The interesting thing about Cabot is in addition to just the manufacturing facility, we also have our cut and wrap facility. So any of that bulk cheese that we have needs to get cut and packaged into products that are meant for retail. So that takes place at our Cabot location. So that particular location is extremely important for us for that reason. what else can I tell you? So in addition to the members, the manufacturing, we also have 2 administrative offices, one in Waitsfield, Vermont, one in Andover, Massachusetts, and we have a series of distribution plants in Vermont. We also have a couple of retail stores. So really our footprint is far and wide in Vermont. And as I kind of mentioned with that movement of whey coming out of Chateauguay, New York and into Vermont, even though we only have, say, two manufacturing plants in Vermont, Vermont is extremely important for all of that, the distribution channels, the supply chain, et cetera. What I will share next is kind of, how we sell those products. So we have 3 major brands that we sell our products under. So I mentioned the Macadam brand coming out of our Chateauguay products. We all know Cabot cheese, Cabot cultured, all these different things. But one of the ones that kind of goes a little bit unnoticed is our Agrimark whey protein line. And so we sell Agrimark whey and whey protein really all over the world. We're in 125 different countries. We have several different whey products that we do. But they are very important for us. And, it's also important to know that when you make cheese, you make whey. So when we start thinking about kind of long-term strategy and what we're going to produce and how we're going to build upon our brand of Cabot cheese and Vermont cheddar and all these wonderful things that are really important to us, that always includes additional whey and the need to find additional outlets. So we have a huge focus on looking at the export markets and export potential to make sure that we have a home for these whey products as well. So though we are just a small little Northeast company, we really, our fingers extend far and wide out there. In terms of kind of where we're going right now, as I mentioned, we have some challenges in our business structure in the industry that we're in. We have a market situation right now that is very challenged because we have been dealing with these demand issues for so long, and we are getting out of that at this point in time, but we also have a lot of milk on our hands. And in the Northeast, we're dealing with some challenges in finding a home for some of that milk. Our production capacity is extremely limited at this point in time. And, one of the major things that we're dealing with right now is the labor challenges that we're seeing. And those are primarily hitting us in Vermont and up in our Cabot location. And I mentioned those because it really gets to one of the main hurdles that we're seeing here with our farmer members in that, what do our members want to do? At the end of the day, our members, run the show, right? They tell us what the business is going to do. And our members, to keep the farms financially stable, they really need to grow. And we are looking to, improve short term on some of our labor challenges that we're having here to open up capacity so that we can have milk movement move efficiently in the way that it needs to move. So that would be, kind of one of the first things that we are really trying to grapple with is the labor challenges and making sure that we can open capacity, not only for our own members, but, really going far and wide for all of the Northeast. We are also, kind of thinking beyond that, looking at ways that we can innovate, think outside of the box. And we have a very strong marketing and sales department, which are always looking at new product development opportunities, efficiencies at the plant to do better. And, I mentioned exports. We've also been dabbling in the licensing arena. Doing things, you've probably seen the mac and cheese or the dog treats, things along those lines, just to make sure we are, looking at, no stone goes unturned and looking at some opportunities there. And I think that is kind of a little bit of an overview about who we are, and maybe I'll open it up and see where we want to go next.
Very good. And I can see the screen now for questions. John, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Dan. Catherine, just when you mentioned it, I'm just totally ignorant on if you could give us a little, some narrative on what kind of products would we recognize that whey and powder go towards? I remember in committee once, Diane Bothfeld was saying that I think it was African swine fever was hitting China and Vietnam, and that was actually affecting, Agrimark whey sales into the Southeast Asia. So there and how powdered milk, what kind of products would we find that in?
Sure. So on the whey side, I mean, you hit it pretty good there, right? On whey, the primary whey product that we see is dry whey. And so dry whey is primarily used as a feed additive or a feed ingredient that is used for, in that prime example, a lot of dry whey in the US is going overseas to China, and it is used for their hog population. And so you're right, when we saw this African swine fever issue go on for the last few years, and we're mostly over it at this point in time. We've been seeing China on a huge spending spree for the last couple of months as they rebuild that hog herd and try to improve upon it. I don't know that we're totally clear, but I think we have a pretty good handle on that. So that livestock feed ingredient would be one area where that dry whey would go. But you would also see, I talked about some of these higher protein whey products. So those would go to nutritional supplements. They might go to infant formula. I've got a bag in my cabinet where, used for smoothies. We see a lot of consumption at gyms, healthcare kind of facilities as well. So the product has a lot of applications, whether it's human or cattle. But for us, and where we're exporting into those, export markets, it's those higher protein nutritional formulas as well as the feed.
And powder, the powders go.
Yep, and on powder, so that can go to a variety of applications as well. So anything from a confectionery type of food or any kind of ingredients going into a bread or anything like that. Those applications are far and wide. That has some other export implications as well. So a lot of our powder is sold into Mexico, and so we've been keeping a close eye on the USMCA agreement. What's going on? Is Mexico following those agreements so far? Yes, but also, what is their purchasing ability? We saw a huge decline in their economy, the peso extremely devalued. And so that's had some implications on the non-fat category where we've, kind of been struggling to get that product into Mexico, where we have traditionally and historically relied upon them. Thankfully, Southeast Asia has become a massive consumer of non-fat powder as well. So some of those losses we saw in Mexico were captured by Southeast Asia this year. And so that market actually does look pretty darn good where we sit right now.
Mike, did you have your hand up? Oh, John and then Bobby.
Catherine, great to see you. And just so others know, I was an Agrimark producer when I milked. Am I right in thinking that Agrimark, and I believe DFA, but I'll ask them, none of you are taking on new members at this time? Is that correct?
That is correct for Agrimark. Yep.
Okay. But if I was an Agrimark producer, and I wanted to expand my herd by a couple of hundred cows, would there be a barrier for me to do that?
So depending on the size of your farm at this point in time, there could be a barrier, but let me be a little clearer on what that barrier means. So you probably all know at this point that we are operating under a base excess program. And how that program works is that you are allocated a certain base production, and at that base, you will get paid the full value for your milk. What we do for any production that we receive from that farm above their base, we basically are saying we don't have a home for that milk. We can try to find a home for that milk, but it will be extremely undervalued. And worst case, it might have to go in the ground somewhere. And so what we try to do is incentivize folks to not send us that extra milk, and we add on a charge. Now in our Agrimark program, we do have some production size thresholds. So if you are a smaller farm, for us, it's up to 2 million pounds. So if you are a small farm with, 5 cows, you could add on quite a bit to get up to that production barrier and not be impeded from doing that. If you were a larger farm and subject to that base program, then you would just have to take into consideration whether adding on those cows is financially the best move for you. And for some, it may be, and for some, it may not be.
Thanks, Catherine. And just to follow up on something you said earlier when you were talking about labor problems at Cabot, and which everybody seems to be having these days, and no one seems to fully understand why. But you talked about hoping to open up capacity. Is that an indicator that Agrimark senses you have more demand out there that you are not able to satisfy?
It's a little bit of both, right? So we know that we have an ability to expand if we have the ability to meet additional demand if we can expand. And we also know on the farmer side that there is a demand for farmers to increase their production, especially in years like we are in now, where milk prices are certainly improving, but the input side of the dairy farm business is extremely tight right now. And so margins are being shrunk. So if farmers could add on additional capacity right now, spread those costs over a little bit more, that would be helpful. But it's that balancing act between returning as much of those profits back to our farmers at the end of the year, right? Saving money, not investing in things, versus knowing long-term, we do need to invest if we want to grow. And with that, it becomes a little bit of a back and forth of what is appropriate to do. And that's a very difficult conversation and a challenging one to have. But to your original point, you see that there is additional demand. Yes, we do think there is additional demand.
And this is my final question. Sorry to hog so much time, but marketing of almost any food product has changed dramatically because, in my estimation, people like Amazon, just supermarkets have become so powerful. Am I right in thinking that they are so powerful that they can and do shape how we market products like milk to the, obviously to the detriment of the producers? It may be unfair to ask you to comment on that, but I just wonder what your thinking might be.
I think that if we look especially at how the last year played out with COVID, we saw an acceleration in the changing of the tides that we were seeing a little bit anyways. Pre-COVID, people were buying their groceries online. We were starting to get into that online space. Dairy was thinking about how we needed to play in the world of Amazon. However, post-COVID, that went up significantly. I think the statistic that I read was something like 65% of consumers were ordering groceries online these days. So I don't think that is, I think that's just something that the industry is aware of, is watching those trends, and is just making sure that we understand and we're reacting accordingly, so that if that is the way that our consumers are going to demand products, we are there and we're there to meet it appropriately. It adds, for dairy, there's a little bit of an extra challenge there in that the perishability of our product has to be considered. So, we can't have a gallon of milk sitting in a unrefrigerated truck for quite a while. But so there's some hurdles that we have to get over there, but we watch the trends, we know those trends, and so we're there and ready to react.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bobby.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, for being with us. You said that your plants aren't running at capacity, I believe. And I'm wondering, are you bringing or having to bring much milk in from New York to keep the capacity at your plants in Vermont in a stable running condition, or do you use mostly Vermont milk in your Vermont plants other than Middlebury, because you're bringing the whey in from New York, but raw milk?
Yeah, so actually the labor challenge has kind of been the reverse of what you said at the beginning. So the labor challenge that we are seeing is primarily hitting us in the Cabot location. And to give you a feel for the extent of that, we usually run that plant 7 days a week. We are only able to staff 5 days a week. And we are doing everything possible to make sure we can get that plant staffed at a fuller level. But at this point in time, we've been having VPs running the lines. It's a really dire situation right there. So normally, in the event where we're operating 7 days a week, most of Vermont milk, I would say, very close to all of Vermont milk is Agrimark Vermont milk is going to either our Middlebury or our Cabot location. With that labor shortage at Cabot, that means that we have 2 days of milk at Cabot that needs to find a home. So now we're out there playing on the spot market, trying to work with our outside customers that normally we would take milk from, say, New York or Massachusetts or Maine and, have that relationship with them. Now we're trying to take some of that Vermont milk and just find anywhere we can go. So some of that is now trickling outside of the states, outside of Vermont. So that's not normally the case, but that's where we're at right now. So we would really like to see, we're just hoping and praying for some relief in that Cabot location because the movement of milk just becomes extremely challenging. Now with the with the Chateauguay plant, so some of that milk or some of that product will come into Vermont. So that product will be made with New York milk. Some Vermont milk will also make it into Chateauguay as well, but it's the actual product of that whey that comes into the Middlebury location. Which kind of gets to the point that I was making of how we're all this interconnected system and family, and really we can't think of just our Vermont plant as being a Vermont plant. It really is reliant upon moving across state lines.
Yeah, and the other question I have on your growth management plan, did you folks allow farmers to sell out their dairy cattle and move the production with the cattle to a different facility? And did that cause, if you did that cause some disruptions in the supply at all?
So we did have what we call our base transfer program. And what that has, the creation of that really said, if you are a farm that's going to exit the business, you can transfer half of your base allotment to someone else, to a different farmer within the Agrimark system. We, as the cooperative, don't get involved in the sale or the transfer or anything like that. We just we approve where that milk is going, because we need to know from a transportation perspective. So what we saw this past year is that for the production that we lost, it was less than what we would normally have lost during a given year, because we did allow for that transfer. But we still did lose some production.
Yeah.
Well, Joe had your hand up. I couldn't tell, Jackie, did you have your hand up or you were just, okay, so Joe.
Yes. Are you talking to me? I can't really hear you very well. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Joe,
This is kind of a question off point maybe, but to what do you attribute the labor shortage?
So the labor shortage, I think just goes back to the general labor market that we're in right now. If you're out looking for work, you have a lot of different options out there. And, so it's just a very tight labor market. Some of the unemployment benefits are surely working into this equation as well. For us up in Cabot, I think, especially during a tight labor market, working on a production line is hard work. You're on your feet, right? And if you have the option to, I'll use the example, driving around here, we're seeing McDonald's, Wendy's employees, you can get $18 plus a big old signing bonus. So, with a little less labor, you're not on your feet as much. What decision would you make, I guess, is the question I would ask. And how do we resolve that?
Yeah.
I think, frankly, while these unemployment benefits are in place, it's going to be hard to make a change there. And certainly I'm not advocating against those unemployment benefits at all. I mean, we've had a heck of a year and people need to be supported. However, it does not put us in a position where we're competitive, right? There is a better option for people to stay home or to go elsewhere. So I think until September, we're in a hard position. And we're doing things like, we're working with temp agencies. We're trying to connect with college students. Really all hands are on deck. We are looking at everything as an option. It's so important for us as a cooperative to make sure we have that ability to process our milk, because like I said, those sales have to go elsewhere or go somewhere else. But even just thinking outside of the Agrimark box, when the Northeast has a situation where plants are in this situation, and we're not the only plant, I don't want you to think that this is a far and wide issue. Yeah. So, dairy processing facilities all over the place having labor struggles, that means we're all looking for a place to put our milk. And right. That puts a lot of pressure on the system, on milk supplies. Heaven forbid we have an issue at one of the plants. We have very old plants. If something goes wrong, now you have more of an issue. And prices take a hit because of that. So the farmers feel it, the co-op feels it, all of our competitors out there, they're feeling it. So it's a really dire situation right now. And I would welcome any ideas you all have. We're looking for some help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a quick follow-up to a question Bobby asked you. So if the 870 million pounds of Vermont milk is going into the two Cabot facilities, how much milk is coming in from either from Diane's, Massachusetts or New York? Is there milk coming into the Middlebury or Cabot facility or New Hampshire over the border? And
that milk
volume involved?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you and I got cut out a little bit. I missed the last portion of your question.
Just where milk might be coming into your Vermont operations, Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, perhaps, and what the volume of that looks like in aggregate for the two?
Okay, so under normal situations where we have, let's say we have no labor issues at our Cabot campus, that would mean that for our Middlebury and our Cabot location, those would be almost primarily serviced by Vermont production. Okay, now with the flow of milk, sometimes you have to do some crazy things and move milk here or there because this plant had an issue or there's something else going on here. But primarily, those two plants are filled by Vermont only milk. Where we're at today is we don't have enough capacity at Cabot, which means that 2 days of Vermont milk that would normally go into Cabot is now having to go outside of the state.
Is that to the powder plant in Springfield or elsewhere?
Yep, very much of that is going to the powder plant, but it's also going to outside customers as well.
a hypothetical, if those 2 days worth of milk could stay in Cabot and you could manufacture, how at the end of a year or a month, how much more money would that end up in farmers' pockets rather than, is there any way of figuring out how much you're losing or our farmers are losing by those 2 days a week of milk going out of state to the powder plant? Did you get that question?
I'm sorry, I broke up again.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can hear me. I'm wondering if we had those 2 days of capacity and milk going into the Cabot plant rather than going to the powder plant at the end of a month or a year, how much difference that would make in farmers' paychecks that our farmers are actually losing, and of course the co-op's losing.
So for the co-op implication, the implication is on the profits that we're losing on a month-to-month basis because of that. And we are looking at up over $1 million, $1.5 million per month lost because of the labor shortage in Cabot. Okay.
Yeah.
So that profit again is distributed back to our farmers at the end of the year. So that's a direct Agrimark member loss.
Yeah.
The secondary loss is when that product does not have a home and is sold elsewhere in the order system. Okay. Sold into, let's say it goes to West Springfield, right? We lose this price support in that regard. And so then there's the implication that trickles down to all of the farmers in the Northeast because of that tight supply and lack of processing capacity.
Yeah. Representative Marcotte, that's on this task force with us, he chairs the House Commerce Committee, which deals with the unemployment situation here in Vermont. And, you know, I think last week we had about 30,000 people that were unemployed in Vermont. And, you know, and here everybody in the state's looking for people to work. And yet we're supporting 30,000 people on the unemployment lines, but $1 million, that's $12 million a year right there in the Cabot deal if we could get that back running 7 days a week. So it's good for, you know, all of us to hear that. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Catherine. Any other questions, or we thank Catherine and head, I don't know, east and west the same to St. Albans. East from Cabot and west from east from Middlebury and west from Cabot. Yes, John.
Catherine, are you staying on? I guess I can throw the question out, but I just wondered, you know, from an Agrimark Cabot standpoint, looking at expanding the company, do you ever think about, you know, if we had a processing plant in California closer to Southern California markets, it would help? Or do we invest in, you know, almond milk, or do we start an ice cream, you know, brand? Where do you go? Or are you just really focused on keeping your plants at capacity now and doing what you really do well?
So there's short-term issues, right, which are front and center, and I've kind of mentioned here today, but we are certainly very focused on the long-term expansion opportunities. And like I said, any opportunity, you know, whatever we see outside of the box, we're willing to go there. That being said, and to your point about kind of our geographical representation, we know that our demand here is in the Northeast and really east of the Mississippi. We have dabbled in, you know, the West Coast and the Midwest and things along those lines, and we have seen some success there, but we know where our real core market is, and it is here. So if you think about where we would want to invest in, say, future processing capability, it's going to be where our milk supply is and where our demand is. So we're looking up, it would be in this general area is where we would look. The other thing is, we know there are many other products out there that we are looking at. That's one way to expand, is to look at additional products. But the other is to, expand our reach a little bit too. And with that, where we differentiate ourselves, where we do well, is our Vermont cheddar. So if we sell product elsewhere, they want, consumers want to know that it's Vermont cheddar. So for us, Vermont's always going to be extremely important, because it's really the core of our brand.
Yeah.
So is it sometimes hard, say, to find Vermont cheddar in a Walmart in Los Angeles or a Whole Foods in San Francisco? It's funny because, since we don't shop there, I don't know what the accessibility to Cabot products are out west, for example.
So I don't have I don't have those numbers on the top of my head, but there is a following for Vermont cheddar, believe it or not, and we can get a premium from that. So for us, in thinking about where are the best opportunities for us to expand, we're going to go for where that higher margin is. And so, trying to capitalize on that consumer demand for Vermont cheddar is going to be very important for us.
Catherine, of the 900 pounds milk equivalent, 900 million pounds milk equivalent, how much is of that is the Vermont packaged cheddar that's packaged in so-called Vermont Cabot, the Cabot brand?
In terms of percentage of our milk?
Yeah.
So let's see here, about 45%.
45.
Yep. Actually, it would be it'd be more of that. So I'm just thinking about our Vermont locations, it'd be about 45% of our milk. And then you add on our butter as well. So that would add on an additional 10 to 20% probably. Those are not perfect numbers. Don't quote me. But just to give you a general feel of that.
We can follow up, but we've eaten into a lot of St. Alban DFA's time. Any other questions, or we'll invite Leon and Kirsten to the virtual table?
I had one quick question, if I could. Sorry, I was raising my hand. I should just speak up.
I apologize for
Yeah,
not.
it's never stopped me before, so I don't even know why I'm trying to be polite. But anyway, I just quickly, Catherine, we heard earlier from the agency saying that they didn't have oodles of money to look at consumer preference, consumer demand, like does Cabot do that kind of work? I mean, I'm just kind of curious how you stay on top of emerging trends and, kind of what's next. We've seen this shift away from people really wanting to drink fluid milk, but that doesn't seem to be the same declining trend for cheese. Like, what kind of consumer work are you folks doing? Is that a big priority or not?
No, it is. It absolutely is. So those efforts would take place in our sales and our marketing departments. And so that would be a combination of their own consumer research, as well as working with partners to collect that as well. So, paying folks for that information, but we need our hands on that information as much as possible, especially when we're thinking about, what the future holds, right? Because it all comes down to demand at the end of the day.
And so you're talking about short-term issues right now, not running at capacity. And then you said you're thinking about sort of long-term sustainability. Because, we keep losing farms everywhere. So clearly, not running at capacity for the last year isn't helping, but that's not the root of the issue that we're experiencing as a whole in the industry. So, I mean, even getting up to capacity, that's not going to greatly change a lot of things, or is it? That's not the answer we're seeking here, I don't think. But you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think it should be one of the answers that you're seeking because, of course, there are many things that are playing into farm profitability. But for members of any cooperative, those members rely upon those year-end profits as part of their financial story. And to tackle different pieces of that financial story. And if one of them is the year-end farmer cooperative profits, making sure that those are strong, that's really important to the farmer. That's just one piece of it, but it is very important and should definitely be a part of the conversation. Will that be, addressing that? Will that change the trajectory? Maybe, maybe not, but it could mean that someone stays in longer for the year and they wouldn't have otherwise.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
for
Appreciate the
making
opportunity.
time. And so Kirsten and Leon, we have basically 40 minutes. Hopefully we can go over a little bit if people can stay with it, and apologize for starting late. And so is this format okay? You basically make your presentation and we will politely interrupt you as we go along. Is that fair enough?
That's fine. Thank you.
Very, very good.
So good morning. I'm Kirsten Bourgeois. I serve as Communications Director for Dairy Farmers of America in the Northeast area. I'm joined virtually today by Leon Berthium, who's sitting in the office behind me. There's a lot of background noise behind me as well. We have trucks going in and out, and I think our lawn service just started cutting the grass. So I'll put myself on mute when I'm not talking. We'd also like to remind you that June is National Dairy Month. So don't forget to thank a farmer. And over the past weekend, we've supported a couple of initiatives and events to celebrate this, one being in Enosburg with the FFA drive-through, and we have other events planned. So looking forward to that. So let me hop into it. So as you know, St. Albans merged with DFA back in August of 2019. So we're coming up, wow, on our 2-year anniversary. Of course, the majority of that time has been dealing, like everybody else, with the challenges that COVID has had on our members, our families, and our communities. So let me just take a minute, talk about DFA, provide some background, and then we'll jump to the questions that the task force submitted to us. So DFA is, as you know, a global dairy cooperative that's owned by nearly 7,000 dairy farmers that we serve across the country. Our core business is to market our members' milk while focusing on delivering quality dairy products from our members' farms to the manufacturing plant and ultimately into the hands of consumers around the world. In our case, we connect dairy farmers directly to consumers by delivering these products. Our purpose, as you likely know, is to find secure markets for our members' milk and pay them a competitive price. We also invest in manufacturing capabilities that allow us to produce a variety of dairy products and deliver returns to our farmer owners. We also offer our members valuable resources and services, and we're happy to talk about those if you're interested. And of course, connecting our family farm owners with consumers by sharing their stories. We, as often as possible, we try to share stories about our members, what they're doing on the farm, to try and dispel a lot of myths that I'm sure you're all aware of. Our members are invested in every product, decision, and step that we take as an organization. They do this through our commercial investments, our network of facilities across the country that provide markets for our members' milk. So for example, Ingredient Solutions, and that's the St. Albans facility as part of this particular group, makes products like powders, whey, cheese, condensed milk for a variety of customers. And of course, we have other divisions that make fluid milk, ice cream, other culture products around the country. So let me hop to let me jump to the question specifically. And again, please politely interrupt if you'd like. So the first question that was posed is how many farms, sizes, and total milk volume marketed in 2000, 2010, and today. So presently we have just over 300 farms in Vermont. The majority of those have fewer than 100 cows, and the volume, and Leon, jump in, is about 1.5 billion pounds annually. Looking back to 2000, and we only had numbers for St. Albans at that time. DFA was created in 1998, and we didn't have that. We didn't have access to that information. So in 2000, we had just over 530 farms producing about $1.16 billion pounds of milk annually. And in 2010, combined St. Albans and DFA had about 547 farms in Vermont. Again, average size around 120, and the total production was 1.4 billion pounds. And we're happy to follow up with any information that you have. I know we're probably going to buzz through this pretty quickly. The next question, is St. Albans plant the only DFA plant? Yes, it is. DFA owns the plant in St. Albans, the facility that I'm sure you've all driven by many times. And they also, DFA also owns Northeast Logistics. So that's our trucking company, formerly known as McDermott's. And we have 4 Northeast Logistics terminals around the state: Shoreham, Irisburg, Enosburg, and St. Albans. And of course, up here in St. Albans, we also have the St. Albans Creamery and Supply, which is our farm store that's open to the public. Talking about raw milk capacity of the plant and what we make up here, we can process about 1.7 million pounds of milk daily. And in St. Albans, again, DFA just has the one plant. We make skim, condensed skim, cream, and non-fat dry milk. Next question was, how much of the milk that DFA uses at its Vermont plants, so plant in this case, is from Vermont, and how much is out of state? So just over 80% of the milk in 2020 that was delivered into the St. Albans plant is from Vermont. Other milk, of course, does come in a little bit from New Hampshire and some from New York as well. As far as milk that's shipped out of the state from our membership, it's about 50-50. So about 50% of the milk stays here and 50% is sent out of state. And the milk that's produced by our Vermont members, which is delivered out of the state, is brought to plants in New England for class 1, 2, and 3 utilization. Our class 1 customers out of state are obviously very important. And in 2020, of course, we sent milk to, and we still are well into 2021, DFA-owned plants around New England, including, let's see if I can remember these, Gorelick, Gaida, Oakhurst, East Greenbush, and there may be another one as well. So I think Catherine referred to this earlier. We can't think of Vermont just, in a vacuum. It's important to recognize that, we're part of a much larger system that depends on our milk. And of course, our producers rely on us to get it to those facilities as well. In Vermont, we do ship to some milk to HB Hood, of course, Commonwealth, and others around the state. As far as DFA's plans for future operations in Vermont, this is exciting for us. DFA committed to invest about $30 million into the site up here. And if you've driven by recently, you'll see that our new receiving bays are nearly completed. There are 3 brand new, there's a building with 3 bays in it. I wish I could carry my computer around and give you a little tour. And then we did invest in new storage capacity as well. So we replaced and added to our silos. We're also investing in our trucks and tankers. And like Catherine referenced earlier, if anybody has any creative suggestions for hiring, we're all ears as well. And so up here, we employ about 200 people, the majority of whom are Vermonters, and not just up here in St. Albans, to be clear, at Shoreham, Irisburg, and Enosburg as well. We're also very engaged with our corporate team, which has been a fantastic partnership. So we're working with them on various sustainability initiatives. You may have heard that DFA was the first dairy cooperative to set a target reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 30% in our supply chain and farms by 2030. And then we're obviously very close to our communities as well, particularly during COVID. Working with our corporate team, we were able to secure some donations. For example, we were able to donate 2 new refrigerators to NECA, Northeast Kingdom Community Action. I always get that wrong. With some funds to support that. And we've made many food shelf donations all over the state, Burlington, Springfield, Putney, St. Albans, and so on. I think we've covered, or I've covered most of the questions. I did buzz through that pretty quickly, acknowledging that we may have a time crunch here. So happy to take any questions.
Mike.
Thanks, Dan. Kirsten, good to see you again.
Nice to meet you.
We've been, I think we heard from Catherine, the labor issues that are ongoing. And I'm just wondering for DFA and maybe Catherine also for Agrimark, if she can jump in also, is when you're looking downstream, so you start at the farm, working your way up, being able to move the product to the processing plant, and then moving the product out of the processing plant for distribution. I mean, are those all areas that we're having issues with labor?
I can speak specifically to the plant and Northeast Logistics. Like Catherine, I think, referenced earlier, this is a 7-day a week, 24-hour day, 365-day a year industry. And when there is when there's a low unemployment rate, or when folks are looking for jobs, working in this industry may not be something that they're interested in because of those demands. So we do have openings right now for CDL drivers and plant operators.
So prior to COVID, there were issues with labor. I think they've been exacerbated by COVID, no doubt. But and I think in when COVID first started, production. I mean, what happened to your production when COVID first came on? When the governor shut everything down, were the plants closed, or was your plant closed, or did it continue to operate? And how? And if it did, how did you lose? Did you lose employees because they were afraid of catching COVID? Anything? Those are kind of interesting.
Our facility did not shut down. We kept taking in milk. Milk was picked up, but taking a step back, of course, the markets were disrupted. So everything went a lot awry. Food service, schools, you can imagine the disruption it caused, but our plant did not stop operating. There were challenges for sure, but we picked up members' milk every day. Leon, is there anything else you want to?
Yeah, I just want, certainly we were deemed to be essential, and so we were very fortunate that our team of employees really hung in through there. As Catherine has indicated, it's really part of a team. And so we, though, them new protocols, because at that point, a lot of new protocols from all of our customer facilities were being asked of our drivers. And so that was really a major change that we saw in getting them ready to be able to meet the demands, of our customers there. It did affect the flow of milk during that period of time. So we're asking drivers to go different locations. It affected their schedules significantly. From a workforce, perspective, that is a concern that we have, is we have an aging workforce. And I think that's what we're gonna have a hard time replacing, is those individuals, as Catherine also noted, from a production standpoint, that really want to work with their hands or get behind a wheel. Are the things that we're having a hard time, finding specifically, as well as the challenges of having people work second and third shifts and holidays and weekends just add to our challenge within our overall industry, specifically. But I think this was going to happen regardless whether COVID, hit or not. It's just something that we're faced with, and we've got to figure out how we're introducing more and more technology, again, to create, I think higher, level positions requiring a bit more, expertise and, potentially, again, trainings that might be more specific, that can really assist us in being more efficient in throughput, through our facilities.
So we're really focusing on workforce trainings, and we put a lot of money into our state college system. We're putting money into adult tech ed, into our CTE centers, and is that a place where you might be able to support or to be part of the ability for people to get those trainings and to get them into your facilities to
Sure.
provide production?
Definitely happy to talk about that. If we can help create a pipeline of workers, I think that's incredibly important. We have in the past, and you all know that COVID messed this up a little bit, but we've been in touch with Vermont Technical College. There are a couple of tech schools around here. There's Cold Hollow Career Center. There's the Northwest Tech organization, stone's throw from here. So we need to re-up those conversations. And, if we can start developing that pipeline, all suggestions are welcome and happy to participate in however we can.
It's a real
I think
great
one
time.
thing, I think one of the things we did have locally here is a workforce investment board. And again, due to funding and so on, that's been kind of no longer in existence, but it was effective. And I think those are the things that we really need to relook at. And in terms, one, ensuring that we're meeting the needs of all of our businesses, if you will, and what are the specialties that are required. I think it's certainly a critical standpoint, and also connecting. Part of that person's responsibility was really connecting young people and people, even at all ages, is what are the opportunities? And a lot of times it's just helping those people find a place to land.
In being part of the Burlington MSA as well, we're competing with other manufacturers, in our own backyard. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
John and then Bobby. Bobby, you're a finger guy like Bernie. It's interesting.
Yeah.
John had his hand up first, though.
I'm not sure whether I should go before Bobby, but anyway. Leon and Kirsten, it's good to see you both. I have a series of questions here. I guess the first one, and Catherine, might want to do. I sort of remember in the past that DFA and Agrimark kind of worked together on transportation plans. Is that still, for transporting milk, commingling loads and stuff? Is that still happening?
I'll start, and Catherine certainly can add. One of the things that we do right now is we actually swap milk. So again, if we have Agrimark milk that is closer to our facility, we bring that milk into our location. And if we have milk that's closer to their Middlebury or Cabot, we've been able to bring it into their location to, again, save those transportation costs for farmers. So, we look at those avenues. We also work in terms of, looking at if there is opportunities where we can help each other in terms of whether it's moving milk, or again, if there's a need for product between us. So we do have a good working relationship in terms of how we manage the milk supply and products in the Northeast.
Right. My next question is to do with kind of, limits on production. There's been a lot of back and forth around, and I certainly know two of my acquaintances not too far from me down here in Addison County who sold their herds out because they received good offers from other DFA producers to buy their base and their cows at the same time. But are there limits as to, and I've also heard rumor that limits only apply in the Northeast in the DFA system and not nationally. Can you comment at all on that?
So let me start with DFA is really broken out into regions of the country, and there are 7 different councils, meaning that they're governed by dairy farmers. And each region really makes those decisions as to what their, in this case, base excess program might look like. So it may vary from council to council, again, depending on, how, well, one, the utilization of milk in that particular region, because it does vary from, again, regions. So it does look slightly different from there. But ultimately, even within our own region, it's really a farmer's decision as to whether they want to, again, produce more milk than what their defined base was. We never indicate to them they can't, but they know that there is some financial implications if they go above and beyond their base. And so, we certainly have seen members that continue to produce and grow, but it's also a concern for those that do want to continue to grow with a current base in place. So that's certainly creating, some challenges per se. I think what we did experience, though, I think there were some farms that were planning on exiting at some point. It may not have been what initially they planned in the spring of 2020, but it was in their, I think, business plans or strategies in the next year or so. And then really beginning to see what we were forecasting for early spring milk prices really created some additional concerns, not knowing how much government support there was going to be in 2020. And I think that forced the conversations or, put them in the forefront. And so some members really took advantage, especially those that didn't have another generation to follow on those farms. When they were approached, they said, maybe this is an opportunity for them to exit, and then maybe move into a different business strategy with their farm operation.
And that's actually, you've sparked another question, Leon. Exiting out of the dairy business, I obviously did that. And part of the reason I did it was because none of my children wished to be farmers. Is it all about the price of milk, or is it all about, is having a transition plan to another member of the family, how significant is that in making farmers decide to stop being dairy farmers?
I really think looking at that next generation, I think, is an important element in terms of what the family chooses to do, with their business, and then what's the passion of that next generation. And I know it's a very hard decision because sometimes they wonder whether they should make an effort to pass that farm on to the next generation, just given the challenges, the economic challenges that many of our farms have faced, in their history. But so I think that's still one of the key decision points and how they can make things work. And obviously, family members, it all depends on their financial situation, can help some of that next generation, maybe more than others. But I do think it's a critical one, but it's also looking at what is the future look like from an economic standpoint. And I think one of the things that we're asking our farmers more and more is really to spend more time on the business side of that equation, where they've got to increase the financial literacy at the farm level. They've really got to increase their experience with risk management programs, not only the government programs, but what their cooperatives are offering. That has to be part of the mix. And so, again, unfortunately, we're asking more and more, a ton of their part outside the barn. And that's not what all of them want to do either. And so we've got a challenge there before us.
And my final kind of small question is, if I'm a producer and I wish to divert some of my supply to a value-added, either I decide to try value-added, or I decide it might be beneficial to supply my neighbor who wishes to make cheese, for example. Is that possible, or is all the supply committed to, and I didn't ask Catherine this question, but is all the supply committed to DFA or Agrimark?
We would encourage a member to reach out and talk that through with us. That there's no
firm barrier.
No,
I think
we currently have
it's,
some members. Go ahead, Kirsten.
no, we do have some members that do that, but I would encourage any member interested in doing that to reach out, because we do look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, Lane.
Thank
No,
you, Joe.
that's fine. Catherine might want to respond.
Yeah, just to give you a flavor, it's very similar in Agrimark. So we have several examples of members who are doing their own value-added processing or similar kind of things on the farms. But similar to DFA, we encourage that dialogue back and forth just to make sure that we understand what that means for the transportation and movement of milk.
Yep. I guess I'm up next, right, Dan?
Fire away, Bobby.
Yeah, I think early on, Kristen, thanks you and Leon for being with us. I think you reported that you had 507 farms, and now in 10, and now in 20, we're down to 300. I think those numbers I wrote down right, roughly.
Yep.
And-
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you're down a couple hundred farms from where you were in 2010. And, in Franklin County, I would expect a lot of your farms are over there. I know I represent quite a few of them in the legislature, in the Senate from time to time. And I get calls from the farmers over there. They're very concerned because they're losing their neighbors, they call them, and they're selling out. And it isn't all because they're getting old or getting tired. Mostly it's because they aren't making any money, and they aren't getting paid enough for their milk, so they can live like a normal family lives. And so I guess my question is, what are we going to do about, I'm sure you're not running your plant at capacity. We already know that Agrimart isn't running their plant at capacity in Cabot. And we could use, as far as I can understand, we can use more milk, and yet we're still losing our small farms. So I guess my question is, what do you recommend that we do in the future to try to get a better price for our farms, at the farm gate? 20 years ago, we were told, well, you've got to move to value added, and the money's in value added, and we should go in that direction. And we did. The farmers have done well by moving in that direction, so that well over 50% of our milk is utilized here in Vermont, but yet our farmers were losing more now than we were even back then. And so what do you see as the future to get up the farm prices where they should be and stay there, or guarantee that? There any plans? Do you folks see any plans in the future that, even we at the state level can help with to help stop the bleeding and the loss of our local farmers? I mean, our communities are all suffering from that, and the dealerships and the feed dealers and all the ag suppliers. I mean, it's really hurting our whole rural economy.
I think the first and foremost, you're absolutely right. Every, farm business impacts the overall infrastructure, for, our dairy industry. And so, we hate to see every farm, make those decisions, but recognize that. But I think we still got to recognize that that farm still provides some other additional economic activity, whether it's to support again, diversified ag on that farm operation, or whether it's really to support or allow another farm to continue to grow because of the necessary, increase in land base that are needed for some of these farm operations. So I think that's important. Obviously the question that you're asking in terms of what more can we do to support our dairy farmers, given where, the economics are. And I think we started out the morning very well with, Secretary Tebbett's overview of all the things that are transpiring, within the agency and where, again, support is being, provided and things that we are looking at. I mean, obviously, the challenge is nationally is, again, we have a pricing, system that really doesn't allow us to, either address issues either regionally by any means. And again, we are now part of a global industry that really, again, has its own challenges and barriers as we look at how do we make some of this, again, be more reflective of what farmers need. And then ultimately, at some point, unless we really put controls in production just to elevate the price of dairy farmers without looking at, some type of production element, is only going to, exasperate where we are today in terms of too much volume and not enough manufacturing capacity. And that's the thing we're going to definitely need to watch, because right now, even in the Northeast, we are limited to manufacturing capacity. It was pre-COVID, but it's been worse through COVID. And now with a labor workforce shortage, it's just going to add to challenges, which is going to be why the plants at West Springfield and St. Albans and our, Pennsylvania plants are going to be more important to be able to balance that additional milk supply on any given day, to balance what's going on with production versus what's going on demand. What more we can do? I mean, obviously we're trying to do things internally to create, economic messages to dairy farmers as to whether they should grow, not grow in terms of their overall milk production, but yeah, it's a decision that they've got to make. And we're trying to make sure we're putting the costs where the costs are and allocate those appropriately within our dairy farmer base. I think we're doing some of the right things here in Vermont. And I think, again, how we can then help our farms is really with some of the things that I just mentioned in terms of how maybe we can support, the financial literacy, how we can support maybe more engagement around risk management programs and really assisting them through, that process. And I think we're going to be asking more of our dairy farmers around climate change. And, again, we're talking about, emissions and things of that nature. We got to be there to make sure we can support whatever direction the state wants our dairy industry to go into.
Well, I think the big issue is, if the next 10 years is anything like the past 10 years, I mean, we aren't going to have enough farms to keep you guys working, and say nothing about keeping the plants running. You have to have an X number, of pounds of milk to keep everything rolling. And it isn't good to lose your raw product base to supply our economy and to supply our people in southern New England as well.
Your point is well taken. I think it's important to recognize that many of our customers today, or plants that we deliver milk to, have multiple plants across the country. And basically our plants here compete for investment dollars, and so what happens is if they look at our continued trends around milk production, they're saying, do I want to continue to invest in Vermont if I'm concerned about where milk production is going to be, 10 years from now? And so it is something that we need to be very sensitive to. And that was one of the decisions, with the Heinsberg facility. They didn't rebuild after the fire because they were looking at trends back then and they weren't sure Vermont was going to be the place for them to grow. So it is important that we maintain some stability in our overall milk volume to continue to meet the demands of some key dairy processors that, we have in this state.
Well, wouldn't you agree as well, though, Leon, that the price of milk being at the 20-year, what it was 20 years ago is what we're getting today. don't
But
you
at the
see
same
that-
token, we've got to remember, your trends of your production per cow, has grown dramatically over that period, even though you might see an average of 21,000 pounds annually. There are herds that are doing well above that, specifically. So, I mean, you just got to look at that. There's much more precision farming, that's going on. And certainly with the work that, Heather and UVM and others have done with farms are making a significant difference. So some of our farms are, again, I wouldn't say making a lot of money, but I may more closer, financially than others. But again, it depends on every business model in terms of what their needs and demands are from a price. And we're never going to find a price that's going to meet all of our dairy farmers' needs.
John. Go ahead, John.
I was just thinking, since that there's this regional element to DFA's, structure. Maybe this is a question for Mike O'Grady, but I wondered, at a national level, are there things Congress can do to set up sort of regional, capitalism, as far as, we'd favor Northeast milk, or if we split the US up into 5 regions and you could give preference to a regionally produced product. I know we talked about a lot running into interstate commerce violations a lot with doing this in Vermont, but I didn't know if regionally there was anything different there.
I think you'd have to navigate a full suite of laws, like antitrust. You'd have to, there's some other collusion provisions that you'd have to navigate. So I don't think it's out of the question, but I think it would be very difficult to do. I think the way to go about doing that is, instead of it setting up, I think back to the 70s and the regulation of the airline industry and how they tried to incent certain routes. But the competitors just responded to the regulatory drivers and it basically undercut prices. It's really something I'd have to think about a lot, about how it could be done. It's not out of the question, but I think it'd be pretty difficult.
Well, basically, the compact was set up regionally. And, we talked back then about having five regions, John, throughout the United States, where each region would have its own marketing ability, but it never got off the floors. But we got our own, and Leon worked with us on that back in those days, and it really worked well. But I don't even know if it would work today. But it worked well back in its day, until we got beat up in Congress with it. But anyways, so yeah, your 5 regions is a good idea, but I don't know if we'd ever get there.
I don't
If
know.
I
what the
was 30 years
transition, Bobby,
younger,
is. We got off the floor. With 26 states passed the compact. We got off the floor. I don't know what we didn't make it where you go next from getting off the floor, but we did get off the floor.
Yeah.
In 26 states. It's quite an arduous process, John, though. Quite an arduous process. All right. Any other questions for
Leon? Yeah, I was just curious. You were mentioning asking farmers to do a bit more in regards to greenhouse gas emissions, et cetera. Do you see any enhanced markets in the forefront for dairy that's meeting these types of standards or maybe not requirements yet, but is there any market potential there? We're talking, a lot of people are talking about that. So I'm wondering if you folks are talking about that too.
I'll take this one, Leanne. That's something we can certainly follow up with you on once we learn more, a little bit about what our corporate team is doing, Heather. Like I said earlier, there has been a commitment on the part of DFA to look at a 30% greenhouse gas reduction by 2020. By 2030. We're in real trouble if that's the case. But happy to share more of that and information from our sustainability report with you if you'd like.
Yeah, I think we probably would all like to see that because that is a pretty big, of importance in Vermont, but also, as you know, lots of conversation around payment for ecosystem services, and just kind of wondering, especially since so many farmers work with you folks, where you're headed as well.
Sure, I'll send it to Linda.
Thank you.
And these are conversations we're also having with some of our larger customers as well. So I think that's the other piece of it, recognizing that, again, it takes all of us to really have a major impact. And so those conversations right now are also unfolding, so which is good.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm really curious too, because I know you folks work with farmers around the country as well. And I just know how different agriculture is in Vermont. And when I speak to that, especially from the environmental aspect on the real positive side, although you don't hear that in the newspaper here when you compare our farms to everywhere else, even just across, the lake, their attention to environment, natural resources, the landscape around us. I said this in our first meeting here too, is how do we capitalize on what is really different about Vermont dairy, but also where that aligns with what's so important to consumers nowadays, and also to the greater good. So I just feel like Vermont in particular, has the potential to be that place that provides that milk. So just wondering again. Yeah.
I think this is a good conversation going forward. Then we need to have some of these folks that are looking for these payment for eco services and the payment for phosphorus in, because as Leanne said earlier, the challenge is you're asking the farmers to do one more thing. And they don't have staff or capability to do that. And I'd be interested in what that one more thing is going to be, how it sugars off across all sizes of the farms, whether it's only going to work for the bigger ones, how it's going to work for the smaller ones, and what the cost is going to be and where the help is going to come from. I agree, Heather. I think we've got a wonderful opportunity to tell this story, but we're asking our farmers, we may not be asking them to do one more thing, but what we will be asking them to do is writing it down and categorizing it and sending it somewhere. And that's always the issue with farmers, is to how to find the time. It's the same with diversification. It's a wonderful thing, but it's one more thing. And so I think, we need to kind of look at the overview of all this all the environmental pieces that are coming down to figure out how it's going to affect all sizes, all kinds, and what the reporting, the paperwork, and the cost is going to be. So that might be something for discussion of this group going forward.
Very, very good. Can I just ask a couple quick factual questions? First, Leon, you mentioned about the need for education on risk management and other strategies. The state has been involved in business planning assistance for a number of years. Of the 300 farms, how many would, and Kirsten, I'm just whoever, of the 300 farms, how many would you say have gone through the state's programs at this point with business planning assistance?
I don't know how we would access that number. I would imagine quite a few, but I can't guess at this point.
And
Hopefully,
we don't have a number, but again, I think I would say it's more limited than, I think, smaller percentage than a larger percentage of our members that might have gone that direction.
Yeah.
A lot of them might have gone other routes versus looking at the state itself. But there is that whole mid-sized group too that really, again, now needs to really focus more on that.
Okay.
Will we be hearing from farm viability in our task force? That's probably would be good since
Right.
they're the ones that coordinate
Yeah.
the program Leon is, I think, referring to.
Right. So it's a question from the top down, the bottom up, as to
Yeah.
how penetration. Yeah. So if I add up Catherine, do you have a sense on your end of the 160 Vermont, 159 or similar? Not quite sure. That it's one of a suite of assistance, financial assistance available.
Catherine signed
I
off.
think she popped
Oh.
off.
Her picture's still on my screen, but okay. Pool producers, if I add up 300 and 160 is 460. So there's roughly 520 federal order pool producers. So 60, as Land O'Lakes now have a presence here with the others, or what? Is there some other grouping of pool producers to count?
So Land O'Lakes does not have members in Vermont.
Yeah.
As you know, Land O'Lakes purchased or acquired Vermont Creamery.
Yeah.
And so that's probably where that additional license was required and reported out by the Agency of Ag.
Yep.
And so again, some of the product that they may be producing at the Vermont Creamery plant may be in part for Land O'Lakes. Kirsten, if there's something you want to add?
No, we're a little bit north of 300 as far as membership is concerned. It's closer to 310, 315-ish. So
Okay, there's still some.
yeah, oh, no, there's still a delta for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Is there bovine milk product coming out of Vermont Creamery in addition to the goat? There is.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've been a long-standing supplier to Vermont Creamery over the years. And one of the things they normally have purchased from us has actually been cream.
Cream. Okay.
And they still do.
So, and that's my final, we got 50% of the milk staying in state and 50% going out, and some of it's going into the St. Albans plant. But is some of that milk that's going into the St. Albans plant being separated out and sent somewhere else so that the finished products actually, the finished product is made somewhere else rather than in Vermont? And if there's a way we can try to put some numbers on how much is actually, I guess, ultimately being of the raw milk is actually being turned into finished product here in Vermont. It doesn't matter where it's sold, in Vermont or elsewhere, but how much is
Yeah, I think one of the things we'd have to do is break that out, because milk it would be broken out into components. You'd have the cream or the fat portion of the milk, and then the skim solids of it.
Yeah.
So again, the majority of the largest percentage, I mean, really of the cream really stays here in Vermont and then is converted into value-added products. We have a fair amount of the skim solids that leaves our plant, again, for locations here in Vermont. Not to say there isn't a little bit that might go out of state, but the issue probably the one that, again, would probably move more outside of Vermont and New England would be our powder, our non-fat dry milk powder. However, we do have had non-fat dry milk powder that's been used, for example, like a berry calabo. I mean, people don't think of chocolate, but chocolate uses powder in their product formulation. But again, our powder might travel greater distances than obviously the fluid product.
Okay, it's very helpful. Thank you. We went into your time just about the same amount of time we took from Catherine, so we did pretty well. Is that any other questions, or is it's lunchtime? I have a sense. Very good.
Again, I think let's go ahead.
Bobby, you were saying something. But you're
He's
muted.
now.
Are you muted, Bobby? That's kind of hard to believe, but I think you're muted. Can't hear you,
Yes.
Bobby.
Must be time for lunch for him.
We still can't hear you, Bobby.
Can't see him now either.
Oh, now
Now we
froze.
can't see him either.
Well, now I'm back. I
Now
went and had lunch. No, I thought John had a question. That's all I was saying.
Oh, John, I missed you. Oh, no, he was asking you if you had a question. Is that right, John?
Oh,
Well,
No,
I had a question when I
think-
saw Bobby talking.
Oh, okay.
No, I just on
hopefully
the
we're good.
agendas going forward, I was thinking in the interim between our two meetings here that I would love to take a deeper dive into places around the world where dairy is stable or even potentially growing. And so like Lorgan for a little bit about a New Zealand model. We heard from the Jasper Hill brothers about places in France and Switzerland where dairy seems to be pretty stable. And then even, I don't know about the Canadian model, but I would love to, going forward, hear more about places like that.
Yeah.
Just to understand them.
No, I think when we planned this meeting from the last meeting, we had questions that we asked our people that buy the bulk of our milk. That's why we invited them in. And no, that's fine, John. We'll be moving, to other models and things like that for future references to our own plan that we should put together and move forward with. Yep.
Thank you very much.
And
Randy?
Dan, do we need to talk about the best day for our meetings? Does Mondays work for the bulk of the committee members? And
That's what we had talked about the last meeting. Is that still workable Monday mornings going forward? Lots of head nodding, Bobby. Good. Randy,
It
you
does tend to conflict with a number of other legislative committee meetings over the summer. Monday seems to be the favorite time, and I know just looking forward, I see some places where I'm in two places at once.
Uh-oh. Okay.
does, did you say if Monday works for you, Randy, or not?
I'm saying that I see conflict coming up about Monday because so often if you're on more than one summer study committee, they all seem to meet on Monday mornings.
Huh.
Oh. I didn't realize legislators like to meet on Mondays. We always start on Tuesdays. But
Kind of thought, if anybody else has potential conflicts.
yeah.
Mike or Linda, when had we planned our next meeting a month out into July? We're running into July 4th. Do we have a date? Maybe see if Randy has a conflict or anybody else on that date while we have everybody?
Oh, I haven't got my calendar.
It would be July 5th, would be the first Monday.
Yeah, right after the 4th.
Is that a holiday?
That's a holiday,
July?
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the holiday.
That's a holiday.
Yeah.
So if we look at the 12th,
The 12th, a problem.
how's that for you, Randy?
I have a conflict beginning at noon. If it's before noon, I'm okay right now.
Okay.
The 12th will work then.
Very
12 will
good,
work,
Mike.
as long as we're done for me.
We'll plan on that then.
Okay.
And
Any other?
I think, Dan, it's also important to suggest to the members if they have anything, they'd like to get on the schedule to get to you or back to me on, and we'll work it onto the
Thing to
schedule.
throw out right now, perhaps to think about for the future. I suspect that there have been thousands and thousands of studies about how to make dairy work, and also about what's wrong with the way we're doing it now. It would be great if we could get somebody to gather together these studies and at least do a brief extract, so that, who knows, there may be a solution to this that's already been invented that we just haven't looked at yet. Or at least there may be something to guide us not to go over ground that's already been well trod.
Okay.
We certainly don't want to waste our ground, and every time you plow it, you lose a little.
Again, Ledge Council may be of help, but also there are UVM has some resources that can assist legislators in doing these kinds of things, and perhaps there are places that we can reach out to get the information we need, so that we're just aren't reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
We're certainly sensitive to that. Absolutely. Other thoughts of what people, I think one thing we should do the next meeting is leave a little time aside for planning like this. Other thoughts from other committee members on task force members on what we should look for to add to the agenda going forward. And feel free between now and the next couple of weeks, if we all hang up and you have thoughts, send us an email and we can go that route as well.
And I know in the first meeting, and I wasn't on the task force, but there were some questions about consumer research and that sort of thing. And one of the groups that we might want to have in to talk about their research is the New England Dairy and Food Council. They have done research on some of the things that were questioned earlier. And Heidi Doloff is a dairy producer. She's the chairperson of that. She's a dairy producer down in Springfield, Vermont. Very, very nice young lady who would probably be able to talk to us, as well as a couple of their staff. So that would be somebody that I would suggest if you're looking for some information on consumer research and consumer taste and that sort of thing, might be helpful.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. So thank you to Leon and Kirsten, and to Catherine in her still picture. And so we'll reconvene July 12th, and if it's all right with everybody, I'll talk to Mike a little bit and see if we might be able to meet in person somewhere, and if particularly if the governor takes the restrictions off. So I'm not trying to go where we don't belong legally, but if it's possible to sit down rather than do this, wouldn't it be nice to do that? So thank you. Anybody else? Bobby? Yes.
No, just wanted to thank everybody and look forward to our next meeting, hopefully. Yep.
And good luck staying cool in the next couple days.
Yeah, thank